Motivation is that flaky, unreliable friend who we always give another chance. It fails to show when we need it most, and even when it does show, its appearance is short-lived. So what can you do as an athlete to maintain your motivation? Well, this video explains the most important and useful theory of motivation that can help you reach peak performance, and it's called self-determination theory. First, let's make a quick distinction on the different types of motivation. Researchers have typically broken down motivation into two different kinds, extrinsic and intrinsic. So extrinsic motivation is about external factors, things outside ourselves that spur us into action. Things like money, status, trophies. And these are still great to aspire towards, but they're not enough in the long term to pursue a career in sport or as an athlete when there is so much uncertainty and the novelty of such rewards can wear thin. That's where intrinsic motivation comes in. This is motivation that comes from within, pursuing things for the sheer enjoyment of them, the fact they provide us with a challenge and are also meaningful and purposeful. This is often what has gotten you as an athlete to where you are, your childhood love for the game or the sport you play. And because external motivators can often be unreliable or outside our control, it's important for athletes to constructively work on building their intrinsic levels of motivation in order to stay focused and engaged. And this is now where self-determination theory comes in. It's an intrinsic theory of motivation that has incredible practical value, so it can help you as an athlete build, sustain, and ultimately be fueled by motivation. It was developed by psychologist Ryan Deci, who argued that all humans have three fundamental needs that need to be satisfied in order to feel optimally motivated. And these are autonomy, competency, and relatedness. Autonomy refers to the extent to which you feel in control of your goals and pursuits, that you have freedom to explore what you want and in ways that you want. Competency refers to whether you feel competent in whatever you're working towards, or that your skills and abilities are sufficiently developing in pursuing your goals. And relatedness refers to whether you feel connected to other people, feel part of a shared culture, and like you're working towards collective endeavours. And this theory has been studied in almost any context imaginable. Whether it's explaining how babies seek to master their play environment, or understanding how visionary founders of companies are able to inspire people to work 80-hour weeks in order to change the world. And it has also been heavily studied in sport. A range of studies have found that athletes who are self-determined are far less likely to drop out of their sport, whether that's soccer, gymnastics, or athletics. Those who are self-determined also feel very confident in their abilities, so they're far less likely to suffer from things like pre-performance anxiety, and they're also much more likely to be able to navigate very tough in-game situations. Quite simply, meeting these three needs of self-determination theory keeps an athlete as motivated as possible so they can retain optimal focus, can tackle the tough moments head on, and can also enjoy their sport as much as possible. So the question is, how do you consciously craft your environment and your experience of sport so that these three needs are met? Well, it obviously depends on the sport because there's so many different contextual variables at play, particularly whether it's a team or an individual sport. But there are some things that all athletes can benefit from. So for autonomy, you've just got to find ways in which you feel like you have much more of a sense of control. This is not always easy when you have to follow set training programs, tactics, and strategies, but you can still take control when it comes to making extra efforts on improving your diet and engaging in recovery. You could also speak with your coach or trainer to ask about mixing up training schedules or days so that it fits more in line with your individual schedule. And it's also a good idea to ask for training plans and schedules in advance so that you can actually plan in your head how you're going to go about the session instead of just turning up and then being told, oh, we're doing these drills or these exercises today. And you can also ask to lead a warm-up or a cool-down or a drill in practice. And it's also a great idea to make efforts to control and shape the culture of the team. So develop rituals like team huddles, chants, or even create forfeits and bets in training. Doing all of these things will ultimately just make you feel like you have a much better sense of control over your experience as an athlete or a sports person, which is at times a very restricted and sometimes quite frustrating and boring environment to be part of. And all of these can obviously lessen motivation, but feeling in control and building that sense of autonomy re-energizes you and it makes you feel like you actually have more of a say in what you can achieve. Then for relatedness, this one will obviously dramatically vary depending on whether you're in a team or an individual sport. But even if you're in the latter, you might be part of a team like a track team. Also, you'll still have coaches and other people involved in your sport who you can relate to. So the obvious things here would be to do more group workouts and practices. It often inadvertently forces you to push yourself further, and it's also a great way to bond. This is essential among Ethiopian runners, as seen in Michael Crawley's awesome book, Out of Thin Air. These athletes, despite racing as individuals, do all their training as a group and believed in a shared energy they can all benefit from when individually they're feeling weak or tired. It also helps them to get through the toughest of workouts by having a friend share the pain with them. And it's far easier for them to wake up at 4 AM each morning if they know there's 10 or 20 other guys or girls doing the same. Other things to boost relatedness include bonding events. You see time and time again that the very best teams refer to themselves as a collective, a band of brothers or a family. And that only comes through harnessing friendships and bonds outside of the sport. So on the team bus, instead of sitting solo with your headphones on, play cards and other games, join in the piss-taking of one another, and make every effort to attend team socials. Is it any wonder Gareth Bale had an awful time at Real Madrid if he was choosing to not go out on team dinners and instead play golf on his own? I think it's clear his lack of relatedness to his team and the club in general led him to appearing unmotivated and not really bothered and quite happy to sit on the bench game after game. And again, as said, you can also help shape the norms, the customs and the rituals for your team. Even if you have an individual sort of motivational slump, the connectedness formed by those rituals, those customs, those practices among the team collective can just boost you. And lastly, when it comes to competence, again, you've got tons of different options to consciously cultivate that. It's just about finding ways to convince yourself that your skills, your fitness, or your attributes are developing and that you are making progress towards desired goals and pursuits. And one good example is when training, use the sandwich approach. This is where you start off doing one drill or movement that's pretty simple, so one that tops up an existing skill or ability. Then you move on to a drill or movement that you specifically struggle with, so working on a specific weakness. Then you finally do another movement or drill that's just simple again. This basically sandwiches the tough drill or skill in between two slices of competency bread. It makes that difficult middle movement a bit easier to chew down. It's also great to finish on something simple, particularly if the middle part didn't go so well, so it doesn't knock your confidence back too much. And this is what Jonny Wilkinson would do. He was the man who drop-kicked England to Rugby World Cup glory in 2003. He only managed to do this by finishing every training session by making 6 consecutive successful kicks. This was a marker of his perfectionism, but also a way to consolidate his inner sense of competency, that he was equipped and ready to do the job on the world's biggest stage. And when it comes to competency, despite being an internal thing, there are obviously going to be some external factors that can play a significant role on your sense of competency. So do your best to avoid arsehole coaches. And if you are a coach, don't be an arsehole. There's a very fine line between being constructive and demanding versus just being a bully. If you're an athlete, do your best to seek out coaches, mentors, and perhaps even teammates with more experience so that they can give actionable, valuable feedback that, whilst focused on what you need to improve, still recognizes the progress you're making in terms of skill, fitness, or overall ability. And maybe even work with a mental performance coach. But doing any of these things will keep you motivated because feeling competent inspires you to continue. It makes you want to level up, keep progressing, even when things keep getting increasingly more difficult. That's self-determination theory, arguably the most practical, useful, and simple theory of motivation that any athlete can benefit from. Hope that has been helpful. If it has, do give this video a thumbs up. Do hit that. No wonder I don't get any subscribers because I can't say it.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine.
On that note, see you in the next video.